Hi, this is Scott with the Android Guys podcast. I'm sitting here with Luke.
Hey, how's it going?
What's going on, Luke?
Not much, man. Just living life.
How's stuff at home?
Good, man. Kids are in school now. It's back to school life, so I feel like I can actually get stuff done during the day if I'm home and they're not.
It's crazy how much time kids take from us.
Yeah, well, and it's not even like they take that much time because mine are like 11 and 14, so they don't really want to do anything with you.
They don't want to be around.
No, they just want to play video games or whatever. But I feel like I can't get anything I want done because they're there. And not that I want to do anything that they can't be around for. It's just there's always like a fight to stop or something that they are asking, or I need them to do something, or it's like. Yeah. But when they're gone at school, I've like redone my whole like crafting room downstairs for like doing miniatures and putting together like Warhammer stuff. And then,
feels like you have so much more time.
Yeah, a lot more time. But yeah, that's really all that's going on. I've kind of delved back into minis and stuff.
That's cool.
How about you?
Well, so mine's graduated.
Yeah.
Now that school's back, he does not go back. And so this is the first time we haven't had to deal with back to school shopping.
Right.
Supply list and figuring out who your teachers are.
Like, why do I need 17 boxes of Kleenex for my son?
Right. Like,
yeah.
Or specific types of binders and all that. Like, it just,
the
whole thing.
Not to derail your life, but this is something that is weird to me. I don't understand when we got to the point that we're buying supplies for school.
Tissues, wipes,
glue, scissors, boxes of colored pencils, like all kinds of stuff that it's really just shared for the class. It's not like your kids' stuff.
Yes. Like they collect them ahead of like open house or something.
Yeah.
And then it's like a community thing of glue.
Yeah.
Where's the kid who just gets his glue out?
Right. Like when I was in school, like I had my whole box of like my stuff.
Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to spend the money on a certain type of marker that you liked and not, the generic, but now it's just go grab some markers because we're going to do this craft. And it's like, no, my mom and dad bought me nice markers. Yeah. Somebody else grabbed them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I feel you, dude. I'm glad to be beyond that.
Yeah, you are beyond that.
He's working now, so he gets up before me.
Hey.
He's out of the house. Hardworking young man.
Yeah.
He's right at that age where he is becoming an adult. He's officially 18, but at the same time, he still has a lot of childlike innocence in him.
He's a grown child.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a toss-up some days what you're going to get.
Yeah, sure.
But it's fun to watch him kind of move the needle into adult,
right?
In terms of like responsibilities and desire of responsibilities and wanting to be like, have the house to himself,
right?
Just because it feels good to be home alone sometimes.
Yeah.
Without like thinking, oh, he's got to be getting into something.
Yeah.
He's just a kid.
Yeah.
Wants his space. So
yeah.
That's what my wife and I have been up to, is kind of feeling that new sense of, what our day is. It's not, we got to get home, make sure somebody's home for him. He's coming and going with his girlfriend, so he's going out to, dinner all the time, doing things.
Did he catch up on all his homework at the end of the day?
Yeah.
You don't really have as much like seasons of the year. I mean, like back to school season or vacation that you have to schedule because he's an adult. It's just kind of three adults in the house.
Yeah, and it's the first time for us. So
right.
It feels really weird to think like, hey, your mom and I are going to plan to do this, and we don't have to worry about you being in school.
Right.
If you want to take the time off and go with us, by all means, let's do it. But it's been a fun few weeks to kind of feel that, because he's still with his girlfriend being a year behind him. She's got school
with some of that
so
stuff,
it's school nights, and he's home early instead of staying super late, and so we kind of do appreciate that because it does kind of keep him from being out and doing things, because we know what boys like to do, both of us. So let's talk about Android.
Yeah, so we're getting back into our history of Android.
Yep, we are. For people who haven't had a chance to check these out, or if they're just jumping in right now, this is kind of a historical look back on the various releases or all the key releases of Android along the way. Mm-hmm. And there's quite a few.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting ready to have Android 12 come out here in the next few weeks. I mean, the beta's out and it's available for devices now. So, but that doesn't mean there have been 12 or 11 releases prior.
Right.
I mean, today we're going to talk about Android 4.4.
Right.
And I don't know what number episode we're on, but it's not 4.
It's more than 4.
Yeah, we're not at some point between 4 and 5.
And there's just spoiler alert, there's going to be more episodes between this and 12.
Yeah, quite a few.
Than 8.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
that's math for everybody in case you didn't know.
It's a weird thing to kind of look back and see how the release cycle and how things were numbered.
Yeah.
And maybe why they were numbered and why certain things were added to a release instead of like, let's wait and put it out.
Right.
Were these things rushed because, and I'm just throwing things at the wall, but were these features that were, we got to get them out because we're getting our hardware partners are saying, we need this, or
is the market tension, you got to keep up with the next guy, so let's put this thing out. Maybe it's not quite ready, or maybe it's we think this is where the market's going, so let's try and put our eggs in this basket kind of thing. It's been interesting to see.
Yeah, so with the podcast format, we will talk about the release of Android, kind of what happened that was baked into or added to Android that kind of gave phones new capabilities, tablets, and a little bit more, made them smarter. I mean, these are smartphones that were really kind of moving pretty quickly. I mean, we're starting to slow down here to get to almost annual releases.
Right.
But it's still, in the big scheme of things, there were a lot of features and functionalities added to Android along the way. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about Android 4.4 KitKat. Mm-hmm. And then later on in the episode, we will discuss a couple of devices. We've got the Nexus 5 and an HTC handset that was noteworthy. So that's pretty much the format. If you haven't heard these before we get into the actual nuts and bolts of Android, Luke, you will take us back in time and kind of get us in the mindset of where we were. For those of us who are old enough to say, oh, I remember that. Mm-hmm. Or people who might be young and say, oh my gosh, I remember when I was a kid that was on the radio or whatever. So hit me with some pop culture. What was life like?
Yeah, so we are going from 4.4 KitKat was announced September 3rd of 2013, and it came out October 31st of 2013. And so in that time, this is the pop culture, the music, the TV, and the movies that were popular then. So if we go music, on the Billboard Top 100, the top song that everybody was listening to, Royals by Lorde.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, that makes it seem so much longer between that album and the one that just came out.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, it's been a while since she had that album, but 8 years.
Yep. Yeah. Number 2 on the list was Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus. And then number 3 was Roar by Katy Perry.
These all existed at the same time.
These were all at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the music that was playing. If you're watching TV at night, there's probably 3 shows, depending on what your household looked like, that you were switching between of like, oh, I want to see this. First was Blacklist.
Was it the debut?
On NBC, debut of Blacklist.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, James Spader. The other one was the Goldbergs. Debut of the Goldbergs.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah.
And this was like, oh man, is this like our generation's Wonder Years?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And then the other one was MasterChef Junior debuted. Which means MasterChef debuted before that.
Those do, you know what, though, that one does feel like it's been with us forever.
Yeah.
But the junior one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's 8 years ago.
You've got me all, you're doing things to my brain here.
Well, it's going to get a little bit more. So, movie-wise, the movie releases of that month, around that month, were Thor: The Dark World.
Oh.
So,
okay. Yeah.
We've kind of in the MCU.
Yep.
And, you know, this was the next Thor movie.
Yeah. So this was phase 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Started to move into...
And then the other two movies around that time were Bad Grandpa, Johnny Knoxville.
Yeah.
And then 12 Years a Slave. Wow. Yeah. Doesn't seem that long ago that movie came out, but it was, 8 years now.
When you think about some of these movies, and they're getting more and more recent, but they just kind of feel like, oh yeah, that just kind of hit its cycle theatrically, the on-demand, maybe hit a streaming, and I just haven't caught it yet.
Yeah.
But you're like, I haven't caught that
in 8 years?
8 years? Okay. Well, thanks for doing that to me.
Yeah. Welcome to the mindset of 2013, fall of 2013.
Yeah, this is this is a really cool release because it was the first one that had a name to it that was a brand.
Right.
You know, prior to it was kind of like these vague sweets, cupcake, donut, gingerbread, honeycomb.
Well, it had a code name that we thought was the actual name.
And it was in the code itself, so it was kind of expected. And I remember, I'm looking at some of the old content on the site, and there was a lot of talk about, this is going to be key lime pie.
Yeah.
Or KLP references in there. And no, that was not.
No.
It was announced in September of 2013, but then released October 31st, KitKat. And this was a whole branding thing. Do you remember seeing the KitKat bars?
I do.
At grocery stores and gas stations that had the Android.
It was crazy.
It was such a thing for me to be like, you guys know that silly website that I've been doing for 6 years now?
Yeah, it's a thing.
It's that Android. Like, people know what it is when they see it now. And it really felt like it had come into like some kind of like public awareness,
right?
And to be able to buy KitKat candy bars that had a chance to win, a Nexus 7,
right?
Or credits for Google Play, like it was like, wow, this is awesome.
But there were still people that were like, what's Google Play?
Yeah, that's true, because it had really switched from the Android market.
Yeah,
not that long before,
right?
And Android was, really started to take off and pick up a pretty nice global market share. But it isn't like saying iTunes or on Amazon Prime or, you can stream this on Netflix. Like where'd you get that app? Play Store. It just didn't roll off the tongue. You didn't know what it was. But yeah, that was interesting. I thought it was exciting, and I didn't know how long it was going to stick around. Like, is this going to be the way KitKat is until the next version of Android?
Right.
Do I buy these things just to show my love and I got them and gave them to people that I'm like, dude, check this out. They're actually Android shaped, and it was cool to see the branding of the logo. Just even like covering it from the perspective of like blog posts and news. It was KitKat bars, and that actually came about because of an actual like one-to-one relationship. From what I understand, is the director of global partnerships, John Lagerling, I think is his name. He contacted Nestle and kind of worked out that deal at Mobile World Congress earlier in the year, which is usually held in February.
Interesting.
So that was kind of like shored up And the Google team and even the developers did not know that. Mm-hmm. It was kept so like under wraps, and that's why you see the references to KLP and Keyline Pi, and that code was, this is a big surprise.
Yeah.
So KitKat, when we talked about features earlier in the releases, you had a lot of like, we're just going to throw all kinds of things out, and there are new features and functions, things that you couldn't do with a phone. And then you would assume over time, and what did happen is it became less and less feature heavy and more like behind the scenes, and then quality of life updates. The last one that we talked about was Jelly Bean, and prior to that, Ice Cream Sandwich. That was the hollow UI that had like the blue. We talked about it being like a Tron, like neons, and it had its own UI. But this is another one that kind of took that and dialed it back, and made it a little bit more neutral. Like it was.
Well, I think it was this was their first public attempt to speak to the F word that we've mentioned in these last couple episodes of fragmentation.
Yep.
So they said, okay, we hear you. This new version, KitKat, is actually going to run. We tested it on underclocked devices, to make sure that everybody not everybody, but most Android phones in the wild now will run this release well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you had a phone that was a year or two old, you could have anything from like 2.3 all the way up. And the idea of, my hardware isn't strong enough to get 4.0, 4.1 Jelly Bean. So this is one where, it was designed to run smoother. And that was the Project Svelte that they did, where the last one was Project Butter with the UI, the buttery smooth UI. This one, they actually said, okay, we're going to create an experience that can run on underclocked Nexus 4 phones and have them set to where they're single core. Because now we're talking dual core processors are the norm. 512 meg of RAM, where now you're getting into a gigabyte, 2 gigabytes, typical of a phone, and then a little bit lower resolution, so that if this is all that's required to run 4.4, the goal is to get that out there to a lot of these old phones and kind of bring them up to parity to have that.
So that all of these Android phones look similar, so the consumers don't have this, wait, I thought I had an Android phone, why doesn't it have this? Oh, like, I need a newer phone already?
Yeah, it doesn't look like this, or I thought because I bought an Android that I could do this. So, looking back historically, like that was a pretty ambitious idea, right?
Yeah, for sure.
How successful was it in getting all these phones to 4.4? Yeah, exactly. It didn't. Better in theory.
Yeah.
But that would require phone makers and carriers to kind of take another or a refreshed look at devices that they were ready to kind of let go.
Well, and it also, I don't think a lot of the infrastructure was set up for over-the-air updates and stuff like that. We were still having to upgrade and do things like connected.
Yeah, or they were just big. Like, it was just like, once it's available, that's it, instead of incremental stuff that happens now with software patches and things that it's like, well, actually, we can fix something that was kind of broken at, the main launch and then roll that out. But, yeah, this was a different time where when you would check your phone, there were, the fan, like early heavy adopter kind of people were constantly refreshing their phones looking for that update available.
Where do I go to download it? Can I put it on can I download the file and put it on my memory card and upgrade it from there?
Can I force this thing onto my phone? So that, and this is also a time when ROMs were still really big and people were flashing a custom build on their phone. Mm-hmm. And what's nice about this one is if you had a ROM that was built off of KitKat, then you knew that it was lighter and you were able to kind of make it get more out of it on an older phone. But that flies in the face of who's buying those phones.
Right.
And it's like the people who are doing that are already buying the newer.
Right. So it's not really a need, quote unquote.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the features that were in Android 4.4.
Sure.
Go ahead. Hit me with one.
Google messaging was gone. So messaging is gone. Hangouts is in.
That has changed so many times over the year. It's a whole argument. There are plenty of opinion pieces on it. There are plenty of Reddit threads and arguments, but that was a pretty big deal to kind of look at and go, wait, I'm going to Hangouts now for SMS and MMS.
Yeah,
this is a time when chat clients, where people would start to kind of gravitate around a particular one and say, well, this is where you message me.
Right.
I don't text anymore.
Right.
You can hit me on Hangouts.
Right.
Because it's on my computer, it's on my phone, my tablet.
Right.
To go to Hangouts, that was and now it's, as we record this, we're a few months away or removed from Hangouts being sunset for the average user.
Right. And it's interesting. I think it was a very ambitious idea. I think they were going the right path of we want to make it so you are connected wherever you are, right? That's why they switched to Hangouts, is you can get your messages on your computer or on your phone, either way. And it didn't quite work because it was foreign to people of I just kind of learned about text messaging in the last however many years, and now you're telling me I have to go and get a new thing, and then I have to tell my friends that I text to download this new thing if they want to text me.
And there were some emerging text and SMS clients that people preferred.
Right.
So they would say, well, I'm going to install HandSend's SMS because I like that. It gives me more, I can change the look of it. The UI is more unique and me. And so it was kind of, and that's always been the beauty of Android, is that choice. Yeah. And that still exists today, and it's still as popular as ever. But it was kind of a, you look at what Google has done, and it just kind of feels like there's always been 2 or 3 teams at work, and it's who has the best option available today.
Right.
Let's put that. Let's rally around behind that.
Right.
And put that out there. That was one of the features. Another one, a case of something going away and something else taking its place, was the gallery app that we had seen for so many years. It felt like, it was years, but that was gone, and we started to make our way over to Google Photos.
Right, which is still going strong.
Still going strong. Yeah, that was a weird one.
Yeah.
I remember around the launch how the idea of being able to kind of have a shared album and people can upload their own photos and kind of collaborate.
Right.
Some of those things that we kind of look at today that are just man, I don't even think twice about, we both went to the same concert. Why don't we just create a shared folder and upload some of our favorite pictures? That's, we don't think about that at all, but that wasn't possible.
Yeah. Until
the Google Plus Photos had come in. And that was a whole other thing with Google Plus and its social. Oh, jeez. I felt like they got, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor here. They were driving into the right town.
Yes.
They were headed in there, and it was going to be a viable competitor to Facebook at the time. But it was they took a couple of wrong turns.
Yeah.
Or they didn't go down the right road long enough.
Well, it was almost like it was they saw. Okay, so to use a little bit of your metaphor, if Facebook is like the big box store, Google was like, we have a big box store too, come over. And everybody's like, well, but we're already parked here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like, I don't really want to drive across the street. Like, I'm here already.
You couldn't take people away from Facebook.
No, because it was already getting to everybody they knew was getting on it. And then it was like, why do I need to switch? Why should I switch?
Google Plus had a lot of love early on from the people who just loved Android.
Sure.
And it was like, well, heck yeah, man, down with Facebook.
This fits with all my world and everything.
Yeah. Well, and when you think about the idea of sharing things, they had it right. You don't share everything with everyone.
Right.
You don't need to see the stuff that I'm sharing about this particular topic, but
right.
I have a small group of friends that, if I want to post pictures of the Lego set that I built, they care.
Right.
So it was kind of a neat thing with the circles and the groups, but it just didn't attract the new user.
Right.
And the people who had already had Facebook weren't saying, well, this is actually better.
Yeah.
And then Facebook had the single login, single sign-on thing ahead of Google doing that.
Yep.
I'm still surprised sometimes when I go to a service to sign up when it shows that I have the ability to sign with my Google account.
Yeah.
It still feels kind of like, oh, these guys are with it. These guys are kind of ahead of other places. Yeah, so that was, what was going on, at this time. A couple of other features, you had the ability to say, well, we don't want to say it while we're in this office, but the OK G to launch voice search, play a song, send a text, and do those things from your phone from
anywhere.
And that was a big deal.
It started to feel a little bit more like every time there was an iteration with things, it felt like more of I am getting closer to the future of what I think my phone should be able to do.
It's getting smarter and it knows me better.
And I don't have to look at it anymore. I can just say, "Hey,
do this.
Play this song."
Yeah.
And it says, "Okay."
It starts to feel more and more like an assistant instead of a search engine.
Right.
Instead of something that can power searching your phone for a contact, but to actually say, hey, I know what your intention is here. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So it's come a really long way, but this was the start of being able to do that with your phone.
Yep.
Hit me with a couple more.
Full screen album and movie art on your lock screen. So if you are playing something or casting something, you could see that.
Which was cool.
Yeah.
And it was with the right artwork and the colors that they had kind of come up with their Google Play Music. And it was it was nice. It felt like, oh, this actually is a little bit more polished than, the Google or Gmail experience at the time was kind of like the grays and the blues and the reds, and just kind of, I don't want to call it Spartan, but much more utilitarian.
Yeah, I mean, it was. This is the app, and then here's the cover of the album you're listening to, and then it went to, this is the album you're listening to, and kind of feels designed within your phone.
Yeah.
Like this is part of your phone more than just you're using an app.
The player alone, just by changing that stuff, really kind of made it feel like, hey, these are polished, intentional choices that you're making, and not just, this is an ugly player.
Right. And then just other ones were just kind of smaller updates, but they were still cool things that, are still around now and that we use. A smarter phone app that you could see who called most, or
it would kind of present to people when you open it up. You're like, I'm probably calling one of these 4 or 5 people. Yeah, which is like, it makes you think back to the T-Mobile
my fives, my faves. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
There was smarter caller ID, so you could look up from maps And
so if somebody's calling you,
yeah,
and you don't have them in your phone book,
it would pull from their.
Like, we know this phone number.
Yeah,
it actually is this business.
And sometimes you would get, like, depending on what was in your phone, if you had, I remember, if I had Best Buy on the Strip as like B Buy Strip saved for some reason, you get a call. I never got a call from Best Buy, but this is an example.
Sure.
They would call and it would be like Best Buy Canton or B Buy Strip.
Yeah,
And it would try and guess, who was calling you or.
And that was cool because up until then it was just like caller ID and data networks weren't quite as fast. So now we're getting into 4G.
Yeah.
So it's able to kind of take this and query it quick enough to give you a result in real time.
Right.
Before they hang up and say, I don't know who that was. Now you get a call and it's immediately scam likely or whoever the business is.
Right.
On the first ring,
you
know exactly who it is. So, yeah, those were nice, like, quality of life. If you've been with Android and gone through different iterations, these are really nice. If you're first getting into a smartphone at this time and it's your first time kind of playing with it, you can't truly appreciate the changes.
Sure.
But you can appreciate the capabilities.
Right.
So it's a good jumping off point to say, hey, I finally got a smartphone and I really like it.
Yeah.
I like the caller ID is pretty cool because I don't have to know who it is. So your aunt or, neighbor can talk about it and say, actually, have you seen this? This is pretty neat.
Yeah.
So the one other feature that I had written down was the immersive mode, which is when you're playing a game, it gives you the ability to kind of get rid of that notification bar at the top and the navigation bar, those buttons at the bottom.
Yes.
So if you wanted to play a full screen game, you got a full screen game.
Right. It was, up until then, it was just static. Those were always there, always showing.
And your real estate for the game was just going to be 75, 80% of that screen.
Right.
Where now you can truly get that thing to stretch. So, and today, with these edge-to-edge screens with the hole punch cameras and the, even
under display cameras sometimes.
Yeah. So now you're getting like a full experience. And now that we use more of a gesture-based navigation instead of those buttons, it just kind of feels like, well, it's a nice big screen, and I don't want it to be taken up with, utilities and toggles and buttons that I'm not using. So yeah, that was one of the ones that I was a fan of because you could see that in some of your games immediately.
Yes.
Like, when I open it, it feels like it's like being at a theater, and this scene is in IMAX.
Right.
It's like the screen expands a little bit and says, "Oh, this is
my
actually."
phone just get bigger.
This feels nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are really the main things that I had written down. Anything else that you can think of software-wise?
Two just really small things. The ability to do mobile printing.
Yeah, well, you know what? The idea of printing is completely different than it was at that time.
Yes.
We were still printing out a lot of things,
yeah.
Where now it's on our phone.
It's a lot of digital signatures or digital things, yeah.
So to say, well, I've got this PDF that you sent me and I need to print it, I'll send it to the office or print it out when I get there.
I have to open my computer or get on my email. Like, oh no, I actually can just open it from here and print it.
Yeah, essentially share.
The caveat there was still if you had a printer that supported mobile printing.
And the Google Cloud print. And so there was...
It's come a long way. It's a lot easier now.
Yeah. But how often do we print now?
Yeah, exactly.
We're not doing photos like we were, but everything's shared online. Everything's in the cloud, so you don't need a paper copy of whatever. So, yeah, but it's a lot easier to take something and say, well, I need a physical copy of this in the office and just, share it to or print it out and have that. That's a big one.
And then the last one is just emojis in the keyboard. And
that's something that I didn't think was going to be where we are today with it.
I know. I thought, so I don't even remember when the Emoji Movie came out. I feel like it was maybe around this time, possibly. It was a while ago.
I'll look that up here.
All right. But emojis were a thing, and it was like, okay, I can see this being a fad for a little bit and then like dying out. Mm-hmm. But I mean, here we are, 2021, and
they continue to add
it's
to them.
part of our language now.
Well, and it's so recognized that it's like the characters and things are easy to pull up. They're in tweets. They're in email subjects. They're in...
I mean, we now, spoiler alert, have the ability in our keyboard to type a word and then just replace it with the emoji if you don't know the emoji for that word.
If you're writing, rocket to the moon, it'll give you rocket and moon emojis that you can do. And I thought it was just like this fad little shorthand.
Yeah.
But the fact that they continue to add so many categories and so many items to those respective categories.
And now variations on those items.
Right.
You can
so
change
the skin tones
or colors,
the hair,
on certain things.
and then the Google keyboard will even mash them up for you, so it'll suggest a couple of options based off of what you
used previously.
Yeah. So 2017.
Yeah. Okay.
Emoji movie. So it kind of split the difference here.
A little bit early.
Yeah.
Still.
So about 4 years after this, and about 4 years ago. So
wow.
Let's do a quick break, and we will talk about hardware.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the Nexus 5, and then the HTC One M8.
All right.
Be right back. All right, we are back.
We're back.
That was a long time.
I know.
It's always interesting when you watch a TV show and they say we're going to take a quick break, like a game show, or you listen to a podcast and they say that.
Yeah.
You wonder how much time they really spend on that break.
If you're wondering about us just now, you'll never know.
I know. I'll tell you guys.
Okay.
But I'm going to put that behind a paywall.
Yeah. For the next person to email us.
Yeah. Email us at podcast@AndroidGuys.com.
/podcast.
No. If you just email me, I'll tell you. If you're listening to this, podcast@AndroidGuys.com. Email me. And I will tell you how long we spent on our break. If you really have to know.
If you have to know. We have that info for you.
Yeah.
So we're talking about devices related to Android 4.4 KitKat.
Yes.
There were two notable ones that we have.
One at the launch.
Yes.
Ready to go.
One,
proof of concept. Proof of here's the phone and the software that we think consumers should demand or get.
Right.
And then one about 6 months later.
Yep.
From a company that's no longer putting out phones for Android.
Yes.
That
but at the time was one of the big players in Android.
One of the premier, and one of the only companies that, I don't want to say only, they were a company that wanted to kind of keep its toes in the sandbox of premium for a long time.
Yes.
And that might have been their downfall. Because
I think so.
When you look at where people spend their money and how often they buy a phone and what they expect, the numbers bear out that it's the $200 phone, not the $600 and $800 phone.
Right.
So.
Well, I don't know anymore now. It's hard. Well,
yeah. Well, they truly are. If you look at the statistics.
Yes.
People are spending on the cheaper phones. They're buying last year's generation. They're just fine with it. However, when it comes to like financing phones, I think it's that top of the line. People
absolutely.
If it's a phone that's $300, people are like, I'm not going to spread that out.
Right.
I'll just buy last year's model and just pay outright or whatever. So let's talk about the Nexus 5.
Yes.
LG again.
Yeah.
So LG was still kind of doing pretty well for itself.
It was.
And this was the second in a row for the Nexus.
Yes.
For them. So the Nexus 5 was available in black and, well, it was white at the launch. But then a few months later, they gave us a black version and a red version.
Yes.
And they look pretty cool.
Yeah. It was a cool looking phone.
For the first few generations of smartphones, a lot of people, it was just black.
Yes.
Black, gray. And when something was offered in white, it was
huge.
Yeah. It was something that people chased. And
yes.
when you saw somebody that had one, you're like, oh, I got to get a white one.
Yeah.
You know, and once in a while, and you'll still see that with exclusives like Best Buy might have a blue one.
Yes.
So a red phone, really striking. And that wasn't the first one to do that, but to see somebody in the wild that had a red Nexus 5 kind of told me some things about them as a user.
Yes.
Hey, you know how to get your hands on one of those.
Yeah.
That was a different thing.
You have discerning tastes.
Yes. You are somebody I'd like to sit down and talk to.
Yeah, it feels like you know what you got.
Yeah.
There's a reason you got what you got.
You didn't trip over and end up with a Nexus phone.
Yeah, you weren't just like, oh, I just need a phone. I like red.
Yeah. They didn't really sell these.
I mean, maybe. I bet there were a couple people that were like, I don't know, I want red.
Yeah. Do they make phones in red? Just give me one of those.
Yeah.
How much are they? So this was available in two storage capacities.
Yeah.
A 16 gigabyte and a 32 gigabyte.
Yeah.
And the price, I mean, these were still priced to move. $350 and $400.
Yeah.
So for $50 more, it's like, dude, why don't I just go for that? But
yeah.
Now, keep in mind, you did have a micro SD card slot. So if you didn't want to spend the $50, you could use your existing micro SD card or, you know, spend $20 to $50 on expandable storage.
Right.
But that was, you know, 16 and 32 was a storage capacity for Android that felt like we were going to take forever to get out of.
Yes.
You know, iPhone felt like it was moving quicker into the 64 and 128.
Yes.
You know, so this was like, well, it only has this, but as Google would, you know, kind of see coming, things were stored in the cloud. People didn't have to store things, you know, on their device. We relied less and less on local media.
Yeah.
Even for like photos and things. Now we're routinely backing these up, and we don't have the pain point of dropping and breaking a phone and losing all the pictures that we had on it.
Right.
So that was.
Well, and the other big thing for, you know, storage size was streaming music. So if you were listening to music on your device, you know, if you were iPhone generation, you needed that storage because you had all of your iTunes.
Yeah, you would sync your library.
It was on the phone.
Yeah.
And Android, you know, you could do that through some players. You could sync MP3s, but really it was, you know, Amazon Music and
Pandora,
Spotify,
yeah.
You know, all of that stuff. They kind of leaned more into the streaming, you know, and that's kind of where we ended up on that side of it.
There was an argument to be made about having the actual files, you know, and Tidal.
Yep.
When it came out with its streaming, but it promised it was like the lossless.
Yeah.
You know, it was truly the way it was intended. But, you know, as we've seen time and again, most people are happy with the good enough.
Yeah.
That this, I don't know what a bit rate is.
Yeah.
How does it sound?
It sounds like I hear it on the radio.
And, right. Or the fact that people played music and still do on their phone it does nothing to help the music, even if it is
right. Even if they're playing through super expensive speakers, you have the fidelity of the speakers, but that only goes so far from playing still off of your phone.
Yeah. So you're looking at data connection. You're looking at the files that if you're using your own files, then you look at what was the CD ripped at. You know, so that was. Kids today have no idea what they missed.
Right.
I mean, good for them.
Sure.
Because that was a whole ugly thing.
It was. It was very complicated.
And I was all too excited to pay one small monthly fee.
To not have to worry about it.
To not have to worry about it.
Yep.
I may or may not may not, let me emphasize that, done my fair share or a share of or have seen somebody else do some downloading of, I believe they're called torrent files.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say
that was a whole thing, man.
Say I've listened to a couple files that fell off a truck on a digital highway.
Yeah,
found their way into my CD case in my phone.
Wait, yeah. It depends on who's listening here.
Yeah,
but that was a pain point. If somebody realized, like, hey, can you get me this album?
Yes.
Hey, is this available? Finding it, getting it, downloading, burning the CD. That was all a thing. And it was all a hassle. When you had the right channels, sometimes I would just give me everything they got, and I would discover music that way.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this guy had a pretty cool collection.
Yeah.
This is, kind of blurring the lines back to the Napster days even.
Sure.
But that's how music discovery was. Where now, this is a completely different tangent that we're on, but to your point of storage capacity, we didn't have to worry about that.
Right.
We didn't have to worry about, well, it only has room for so many albums.
Right.
I can just stream it.
Right.
So data connections are a lot better. I'm on Wi-Fi all day, so I might as well just stream the music. It's just good enough for me.
Yeah.
And that's where we are today. Mm-hmm. So 1632, and that kept the price point in line too.
It did.
Let's talk about some of the other specs.
Yeah.
At the time, this had a pretty... this was kind of an interesting benchmark that we kind of saw time and again for a while. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 800 processor.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
Yeah, it was a quad core.
Yeah, and you're looking at 2.2 to 2.3 gigahertz, where you're, wow, that's as strong as my laptop. That's
right.
The RAM and some, look, yeah, you're thinking along the right lines in terms of performance. Yeah, you're getting closer and closer to this is all you need.
Yes.
Especially when you're looking at what's in a tablet.
Right.
But in a phone, that was screaming.
It was great.
And when you paired it with, that much storage, and I'm trying to think what the RAM was on that thing.
Well, while we're looking at that, it had
2 gigs.
2 gigs of RAM. So that was decent for a phone. That was still, right in line. But you had that processor that was starting to creep up, like you said, into laptop territory, and it was like, man, if this thing could get more RAM, this is like having a laptop in your pocket.
Yeah, and we saw a couple of manufacturers right around this time try that.
Yep.
Let's Motorola with the Atrix, they made a whole dock of let's put our phone in here and have it be the brains of this dummy display.
Right.
Because this truly is all the brains you need.
Right.
Here's a big screen with a keyboard.
Right.
So, and as we see with Chromebooks and things like that today, we don't need to drop that, $1,200 to $2,000 on a laptop anymore.
Right.
These phones are getting very close. And this is also to the point of around the world, the first internet experience for some of these people in other countries is on a mobile device.
Yep.
So it's beefy and more than capable.
Yeah. Speaking of beefy, 4.95 inch screen.
That was huge, right?
Yeah.
Remember how big 5-inch screens felt?
1920 by 1080.
This is an HD screen.
True HD screen.
5 inches or just under. That just felt like, wow, this feels right. This is, and I am one of those people that, I don't have a very big hands.
Sure.
So I kind of like that 5 to 5.5 inch that we have now. When you factor in bezel and you factor in aspect ratio for the screen, this is at a point where it's just like, this feels like a nice polished design. A screen that's big, and that, again, to the point of the immersive mode, things felt like the games just had a little bit more room to breathe.
Right.
Tell me about the cameras.
Yeah, so it was an 8 megapixel rear camera and then a 1.3 megapixel front camera, which, the 1.3 front was pretty standard. The 8 was like top of the line.
Yeah.
This was a really nice camera.
And one of the things that, as I'm looking here at some notes, that later there was a 4.4.1 update. So there's a small update that came out like 2 months after. And it gave the phone the capability to do HDR plus photos.
Oh, yeah.
That had some autofocus issues that it addressed, and some other like white balance and things like that. So it kind of improved that. But the ability to take like short bursts of images and kind of, use AI or computational and kind of figure out what's the best shot.
Yeah.
This is where it's one lens. Google's getting pretty good about, and they're really starting to lean into the camera experience for their devices.
Right.
So it was, and this is, a couple of generations still before the Pixel line.
Right.
But it was like, okay, Google obviously has its sights set on some smarts around the camera.
Yes.
So even with other cameras that came out with a second camera, or ones that had, higher megapixel count, it's, as we see, it's not about that anymore.
Right.
It's just show me the results.
Right.
So 8 megapixel rear, 1.3 front, micro USB.
Yep.
We're still,
still there.
Yeah, it's going to be a while before we see USB-C kind of hit that, like, maybe 2 years roughly before you see it in a phone and you're like, oh, what's this? This is the new thing.
Yeah.
So you got to buy a new cable. Yeah.
Right.
So we'll get to that here in the future. Wireless charging.
Big
thing. That was also in the 4.
Yep.
But that was just kind of like, okay, it's a big enough feature that we think we're going to continue to include this as kind of like
it was
benchmark.
Catching on.
Yeah.
It was a thing. It wasn't, because at the 4 it was still like a proof of like, do people really want this? And we were starting to see by this time third-party manufacturers releasing, some car docks that had wireless charging in it, or computer peripherals that you could put your phone there to wireless charge. And this is just the beginning of that. Now they're a dime a dozen. They're almost everywhere.
Yeah.
But it was, it was a thing that was like, oh yeah, everybody's on board. This is a thing now. People want wireless charging.
Did you ever own one of these?
The
Nexus
5? No, I didn't.
Neither did I. I have a chance to play with a lot of phones, but I also find myself going back to things that feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And I tend to, I am acutely aware that I don't need as much as what some of these phones offer.
Sure.
And I always kind of like go back to like, well, what was I using at that time? It was probably something that was older, and I was totally content with, no, this is good enough.
Yeah.
I would run into people that are like, well, dude, this is your business. This is what you should have. The top of the line, or what, you're recommending this old phone. Like, I'm a regular person,
right?
Because I cover it doesn't mean
right
I need to be driving. And same thing, if you think about somebody who covers cars, it could be your beat, but that doesn't mean you have to drive. Your needs aren't the same as somebody. So I did not spend too much time with the Nexus 5 other than reviewing.
Sure.
And but I liked it. I think LG did a pretty good job when they handed them the ball for a while.
Oh, for sure.
On that. Let's jump forward a few months real quick and talk about HTC One M8. HTC had done the One model. Yeah. And then they had the M7, the M8. And they had actually done a version of this that had Windows. You remember they were still doing...
I do.
They had their 2 feet in different
Windows
water.
Mobile.
So this is the Android version. This one runs Android 4.4.2, so still KitKat, but 2 kind of patches later.
Yep.
This was, again, this goes back to the, if you picked it up, it felt heavy.
Yeah.
And it felt premium. It felt kind of like, well, this is obviously a more expensive thing. I really liked HTC right up until around this point.
Yes.
I liked some of their phones were so unique, but then when they kind of stuck with, this version looks almost the same as last year's, and it just kind of fell flat for me. But
yeah, it's like they stopped innovating slightly.
Yeah, it just became, yep, here's this year's. And you see that now with other phones, but it was like they did it too early.
Yes.
And they did it to the point of like, well, I really can't tell the difference between these two.
Right.
But I don't know if that was their intention or not. But
yeah.
This phone was available in gray, silver, and amber. And they always did a nice job of like, they just look like a nice polished phone.
Yeah.
But it just didn't have the brand attraction that people...
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that went to the store and said, I want an HTC phone.
Yeah, well, which is strange because to me, this had HTC Sense still. So it was Sense 6. And Sense was just a little bit of a shell on top of Android that was their, branding, similar to how Samsung has some stuff, or, they've kind of gotten away from it a little bit, but they used to have their version of Android skinned on their phones. But the HTC Sense to me never felt like it was blocking the experience of Android. It was just augmenting it. I felt like they did a really good job of making Sense make sense.
Ooh, I was wondering if you were going to go there.
Yeah, yeah. But it would truly they understood UI, I think, very well, and how to make it look appealing to the average user
without making it so that it felt like you were trapping you in some kind of ecosystem.
Yes.
Because we know Samsung has other products and other services, and it's, hey, if you want the best, this all talks to each other.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Apple. Like, if you're in that world, why bother going out?
Right.
HTC didn't have to do that.
Right.
It was, hey, we have Blink Feed. We have these other features that they're kind of cool. The HTC Zoe kind of thing. That was like, oh, wow, I kind of like what you're doing here.
Right. I don't feel like you're trying to sell me something else, though.
Yeah. So that was the software on that. Hardware-wise, 5-inch screen, so almost the same exact. Again, 1920 by 1080.
Yep.
This is one that the camera was... This is where talking about cameras kind of got hard on phones.
Yes.
Because up until that point, even digital cameras, people just had this mindset that megapixels equals better.
Yes.
And this thing had a 4-megapixel rear camera, but it was an ultra pixel.
Yeah, so which was very confusing to the consumer. This is the newest thing, but it has half of the megapixels of last year's
truly
thing.
They would be quick to say is this is essentially like a 16 megapixel. Like, are you just trying to brand this ultra pixel technology?
Is it really like a 16, or are you just saying that?
Like, is it that many pixels? Or I felt like that was an opportunity to kind of like, you took a left when everybody was expecting to continue going right.
Right.
And when you start to introduce, even today we still see that a 64 megapixel camera, which actually it's a 16 with, the processing, it upscales it and makes it, 64 megapixels. It's just a bigger file.
Yeah, it makes it similar to a 64 megapixel photo, but it's really a 16.
Yeah. So around front though,
a 5. Yeah. It was like a.
Is the front better than the back?
Exactly. And
on paper, it sounds.
That was what I think. It's what was so confusing, is like, wait, this has more megapixels, but my selfies don't look as good as my photos still. Like it just was. It was a strange situation, and the selfies looked great, but it still didn't look better than the back camera.
How do you square that with these numbers that you're telling me?
Exactly.
Yeah. Rounded out real quick. This also had a Snapdragon 801.
Yes.
So it was like a slightly
just the newer model.
Of the processor. I remember this thing had the dot view case, and I really liked having this. until I didn't like it was like really cool to have, but then it was also kind of a pain sometimes.
Sure.
This is a case where it would actually snap onto the back of your phone, and it had like this rubber, like it just flapped closed, and felt like it just wanted to stay on there. But you could see through these holes. It was like pixels of like, oh, it looks like the time through here.
Yeah.
Or you could see the sun because it would light up and look like a pixelated sun. You could see who's calling and do some of these things without having to like expose the screen to the elements or whatever. But that was a cool concept, and one of the only times that I was really kind of interested in having like a folio kind of cover on my phone.
And it was weird because it felt like an interactive case, which you never really had before.
Yeah, and it kind of paved the way for what we saw later from them, but Samsung and LG with these cases that were, wait, you're protecting it, but you're actually giving me things that I can see without having. They're not active, they're not asking me to take action on it, but it's passively presenting me things without completely draining my battery all day.
Right.
It's just giving me this part of the screen.
Yeah.
So, that was the. Yeah, I like that version. Now, this is also a time where HTC and a couple of other phone makers, Sony, thinking of one, they would do a Google Play edition of their phone.
Right, yeah.
Which, for all practical purposes, was that hardware with stock Android. And this was interesting because up until then, HTC was really, you had to go with that sense and that look. But it was, keeping an eye on the followers and the community at that time. That was a beautiful device. And with stock Android, that was the one where the fans were like, dude, that's the one for me.
Yeah.
If I'm getting a Google Play edition, I'm getting the HTC because their build quality.
Yep.
So, that's the... and that was March 2014. Luke, you got anything else?
No.
Hardware, software? Cool. So that's going to do it. Now, if you happen to, I don't know, let's say you got into your buddy's car 20 minutes ago, and he was listening to this and driving down the street, and you're like, this is kind of cool. What are you listening to? This is the Android Guys podcast.
That's true.
And we're doing a historical look at Android. This is Android 4.4. So we're looking at about a little over a third of the way into the life cycle of Android so far. So that's what this is. If you want to find us, you can pick us up on your favorite podcast app service. We're streaming pretty much everywhere. It's really weird to see podcasts in places that didn't used to have podcasts, like Audible.
Yeah.
That was a weird one for me to see, like, well, wait a second. My episodes, the shows are in Audible? Like, that's just books.
Yeah.
Now it's, So, wherever you're listening to your shows, if you get a chance, subscribe. If you have any questions, feedback, or if you want to know how long our break was earlier, contact us at podcast@AndroidGuys.com.
And if you have any of these devices, like, just shoot us a message of what you remember about that device.
Yeah, because I know that some of the things we talk about are some people's first foray into Android or their favorite phone that they ever owned.
Or their most hated, too. They're like, oh, you know what? That Nexus 5, man, no.
That sent me running to Apple.
Right, yeah. If that happened, let us know.
Yep. All right, until next week, or next episode, I should say. See ya.
See ya.